We're gonna spoil it, guys, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Everybody dies. Actually, fewer people died than I thought were gonna die. It's like, just because we don't see him in Rogue One or we didn't see him in the original trilogy, don't assume that they all died somehow between that, whatever we're watching at the end of the series, because we knew Luthen was gonna die, right? I mean, because he kept telling us he was gonna die.
Yeah,
he doesn't end up dying. He's always saying left and right he's gonna die, right? So
like, this guy's got a death
Cyril
wish.
dying surprised me a little bit, and then, like I said, where I got really surprised is Patergast dying. I didn't see that coming. Him killing Lonnie, I didn't see that coming. Deidre ending up in the women's version of Narkina, whatever, I didn't see that coming. You know what I mean?
Still
all these
alive.
people lived. Yeah. And then Vel and, then you look at Vel and Mon Mothma, and they never looked happier. They had none of their wealth. They had none of the things that weighed them down. The whole time they were on Coruscant, they were sitting at a picnic table eating rations, and you never seen them happier. That was just perfect.
Yes.
I mean, that particular part of the finale, I thought was really, really well done. But like I said, I didn't really care for Luthen's backstory. Again, it's not that I hated it. It's just they made it very Clea focused, which I kind of thought when I kept hearing she was going to have an expanded role this season. I'm like, okay, I like the character of Clea, but they basically turned his backstory into sort of like a guilt trippy kind of thing, right? He felt responsible, I think, for what happened to her family, and she never forgave him for it the whole rest of their lives. Yeah. I think he was trying to atone for it, and she never. Maybe in the last moment when she disconnected that life support machine, maybe she forgave him for it then, but I'm not even sure if she did. So I just didn't think. Maybe now I'm talking myself out of it, but I didn't think it was. I didn't think it was as a powerful way for his character to go out. And then they sort of besmirched his name for the whole rest of the finale. Right? It was almost
it kind of did. Yeah, that's true.
It's hard.
Yeah.
No, it was like wasn't it strange? Maybe it shouldn't be, but it was like Luthen said this, and Luthen were like, well, we never trusted Luthen and all this. And I'm like, no, it kind of ended up in the same boat as Saw in a way.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't, maybe that was the point of it all. Maybe I just like Luthen more than I guess I did. But if I had a gripe around the characters and the way they ended up, I thought the hospital business with Luthen, it just didn't do it for me.
Yeah, and that is the con that I was going to go to in spoilers, and I'll go to it right now because the choice that he made there didn't feel as authentic and real to me whenever he decided to take himself out with a knife. I felt like if you're in a high stakes situation where you can't be discovered and you shouldn't let all of these items and everything that you've been discovered. My point that whole time was, why does he not have like a bomb strapped to the whole place to go up? I was like, that would have made a lot more sense. Then he would have gone out like a boss because he would have been taking a ton of Imperials out with him, taking Dedra out with him. She would have lived up to her namesake, Dedra, and he would have been the one to do it. Since she had been hunting Axis the whole time, it would have been even more, I feel like it would have been even more satisfying for him to take her out. Like, she's been fishing for him the whole time, but he's still a step ahead and takes her out. And then but the reason they didn't do it because they needed the tension and they needed Clea's story, which I agree. That is one of the other cons for the entire series for me. I do feel like, and maybe this is some of, backstory with Disney, Star Wars, and KK. For me, it does feel like, they can't just let a man have like a good moment. It has to be a woman right there alongside him, or even overshadowing him in some ways. And that's not everybody in this, but I did feel some of that. I thought this was a lot more balanced approach, and at least they didn't completely smear Luthen's name, because Andor did stick up for him, which was rightly so. That's why I felt like that speech that Andor gave at the end, I thought was so deserving, because he was right. He was totally right. You know, you have none of this without Luthen. None of it. And for how epic that character was, I would have liked to see him go out a little bit more strategic, I guess you could say, or you know, having a backup plan, you know, especially since they showed that they like explosives. It would have made a lot more sense to me. That's probably one of the biggest misses for this arc, in my opinion, and even Luthen. From the time we met Luthen into his end, I was like, he's got to go out like a hero. He's got to go out sacrificing himself. And he did sacrifice himself for the cause, but it just wasn't in quite, and maybe that's just my own, you know, wanting to make it better than what I got, but again, it's my opinion. So yeah, I agree. I'm definitely on that train there with you. It would have just been so epic. But I did love their monologue and their conversation that Dedra and him had in that shop. I thought was so good. He was playing, anytime Skarsgård's on the screen, he just captures your attention. And that's what I loved. His acting was top notch. Pretty much any scene he was in this show, I was just glued to the screen. I'm like, what is he going to do? What is he going to say?
When she said, "Is everything in here real?" and he said, without missing a beat, well, there's only two things in the shop, whose provenance is unverified or whatever. And he meant the two of them. He didn't mean the knife. He didn't mean the artifacts. He meant them. Right? I mean, but just the way that line was delivered. I mean, you know, and then she pulls out the Star Path unit. Whoever thought we were going to see that stupid Star Path unit ever? Right? Exactly. I'm like, this is just crazy. I mean, just the way they did that whole thing. So I loved the interaction, you know, they had in that shop. And by the way, a complete aside, did they live in his ship? Right? Because at the beginning of that episode, he was like getting dressed again, and they were in the ship. And then when they searched the ship, it was like in a landing pad that was apparently behind the shop. Did he and Clea live in his ship? I don't know. Acquiring minds want to know.
Yeah.
She had to have had like some kind of bed or something there, because when he was gone, where did she sleep? But
she was in her jammies that one scene.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe there was a cot or something back there. But on your point, maybe if he was in the back room, there was a button, and if he pressed the button, the whole place would go up. And because what happened was he got circumstantially caught out in the main area by himself, right? Because if you remember, it was always like either he was in the back and Clea was in the front, or Clea was in the front and he was in the back.
Yeah.
Or they were both, when they were both in the front, she was like behind a case. And so in my mind, I guess I kind of always thought one of them was near a kill switch. And so I have to believe that he was caught pretty much off guard by the fact that Dedra showed up when she did. And so the knife was his only play at that moment. But I do think that that's where that episode fell down a little bit for me, right? And then the whole hospital business, I don't know. As real as the hospital appeared,
right?
I'm kind of like, are we doing this right now? And by the way, they ran out of money. They designed for that hospital, because they ran out of money. They basically just had one floor, and they kept redoing it. When we saw it as multiple floors, it was just one floor, and they kept changing it around. The guy who did all the sets had to improvise, because they weren't able to do that exactly the way they wanted, and it totally worked. But I'm like, okay, so it really went very Jason Bourne-y, right? It really, you could see him Gilroy playing to his strengths in that whole sequence. To me, it just went on a little too long. So when I talk about the episodes not being long enough, or how maybe they utilized their time or didn't utilize their time, this is why episode 10 is my least favorite of the arc, right? And that's why you all were like, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. I'm like, well, shoot, you know, maybe
it's interesting.
A little bit more, you know, what it is what it is. But, and then every one of the Imperials that were there were just dummies, right? I mean, how stupid are you, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
tactical agents, the stormtroopers, all this. I'm like, they were just nincompoops,
They
right?
were
And
pretty
they're running
useless.
around and all this nonsense, and she's shooting them willy-nilly, and then she's blanking. I mean, again, there was just some things there that I was kind of like, all right, it's a little silly, but it was still suspenseful, right? It wasn't like it didn't pay off. You know what I mean? They did it well.
Yeah.
It just wasn't my preference.
Yeah.
That's Clea Born.
Clea Born.
Right? And then she just kind of disappears in an elevator, the door closes, and she just kind of gets away, and they think there's 3 of her, and then the hospital administrator shows up as a jerk. I'm like, what are we even doing?
Yeah.
Turned into the pit all of a sudden. I'm like, what are we doing here?
especially for the last arc, that did feel a little like forced in some ways to me, and that's why I feel like it would have tightened up a little bit more. But I think they felt like they had to finish that backstory they gave for 10, and that's why I ended up liking 10 so much. Again, was just basically because we had more Skarsgård and Luthen, and seeing his backstory is what I enjoyed about 10 the most. Now, do I absolutely love his backstory? Not in every way, but it felt real and it felt raw, and the way he handled the whole terrible situation he was in, it showed that, you know, there was good in him, and that he could not stand for what the Empire was doing. I don't necessarily love the relationship between him and Clea, to your point, and how, yeah, she never forgave him, and he was trying to protect her, but also keep it very real for her at the same time. I mean, he was trying to be the best survival figure, you know, that he could be, and teach her and show her. And I felt she felt a little girl boss to me, and sometimes, and that throughout the whole series, honestly, in my opinion, that grated on me a little bit. Not terrible, but it was more for the fact that I just love seeing more Skarsgård and Luthen and his backstory a little bit
And
more.
then
I would have loved to see more.
she had a very weird opinion of Yavin, didn't she, Clea? Right? She didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because he worked so hard on it, and so she was so. But you know what I mean? She was very anti going there.
Yeah.
And I don't think it had anything to do with going there without him. She was just not about it. And I don't think I watched it again earlier today thinking maybe I just missed something, but I'm not sure I understand exactly what it is she disliked about the idea so much. You would have thought, in a way, she would have been somewhat happy to go there and continue to participate in the rebellion that they built together. Right, or maybe it's because she was associated with Luthen, and the Luthens, they were not a high, again, like I was talking about earlier, they didn't have such a high opinion of him, and maybe she just felt like it was guilt by association. Maybe you guys have a different opinion on that than I do, and you can help me. But I just didn't get why she was so anti-Yavin, but it was quite overt, right? She was not happy about going there.
Yeah, she didn't. Sorry, do you have a take on that?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, yeah, I didn't get why they didn't have a plan to leave Coruscant.
Right.
Or, like, where were they going to go if they did get burned?
Yeah.
Which they had to know was going to happen at some point, right? So, yeah, there definitely seemed to be a few loose ends there, in my opinion, too.
Yeah, I think personally for Clea, with the arc that they gave her and why she didn't want to go to Yavin, I think they were leaning into the fact that she didn't feel like she deserved to go there, and that she didn't know peace. You know, her whole life basically was spent hating the Empire, and to go to Yavin, I think in her mind felt like maybe giving that up or letting others take over the mantle. Whereas I think she, like Luthen, thought that she was going to go out doing what they had been doing this whole entire time. And I think she was having a hard time wrapping her mind around a situation where she wasn't doing that kind of work, letting the Yavin 4, the actual rebellion, take over and do it more, I don't know, honorable, not really, but just
in different ways.
Just a different way. That's kind of more the take I got. I don't know if that helps you at all, Matt, with that, but that's kind of the take I got. Like, it was more, she didn't feel like she deserved it.
I get it, and I mean, even Cassian was like, you can go there and rest, right? And I don't think she was anti-rest. And some folks in the chat are saying, again, maybe she didn't know really. She'd been with Luthen so long. Maybe again, it's got to be some growing pains there for her or whatever. But also, I guess when you think about it, maybe she never really considered him a friend, right? But I don't think she had any friends other than Luthen, right? For all these years, it was just them, right? I don't think they had a real social circle. I mean, I don't think they went out, I don't think they went out to the bar and played cards on the weekend. You know what I mean? I don't I don't think it was a very social experience for them other than just the two of them together. So I'm sure there was also a part of joining a community, because really that's what you saw, right? You saw them had built a community in Yavin, even if it was circumstantial or via happenstance. But that's what really impressed me as he was walking. Some people I've seen online, why did it take him so long to walk? I'm like, you missed the point. If you're asking why it took him so long to walk if you're asking why he watered the plants before he left the hut and why it took him so long to walk to where he needed to be, you've totally missed the point of what they were trying to communicate. But as he did take that painfully long walk to get towards to where we knew him in Rogue One, passing by this community and actually then seeing Clea sort of wake up literally and sort of, I think, realize at that moment that maybe she could start again, right? Maybe she had found some camaraderie that she didn't know existed. Probably the same reason why Bix went back to Minarao, candidly, right? To be with Brasso's wife or girlfriend and to be back in that community, right? Because these people never really knew a stable community ever. And so maybe that was also a part of the reason why Clea was so afraid to be welcomed in at Yavin and into that community, because I just don't think she knew how to do that. Of all the skills she had, I don't think that might have been one that she ever had to exercise. Maybe that was the point.
Yeah. I feel like she should have probably not made it in the sense, like when she went in the hospital, it would have made sense to do what she did with Luthen, and then she went out. You know what I'm saying? And because she was like, "I'm not leaving Coruscant. I'm not going to." Then she gets to Yavin, and they didn't show. They gave her what? Like, was it 2 seconds at the very, very end where she looked happy when he walked by her? But like the whole time she was there, she's just like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on." Of course, you've just dealt with the worst thing. You did the worst thing that you had to do, giving up Luthen in a traumatic way, and obviously take the people out. See, I actually love that whole sequence. Personally, how it transpired, I thought it was brilliant. But then when after that, though, I felt as I was like, what happened to Clea? Like she was kind of like messed up, and they just didn't feel like they satisfied like her finale. Like she should have just gone out. I feel like Val should have just gone out, and I feel like Bix never should have left. She's a fighter. She just got her feet back under her. Now, yes, she has a baby now.
I'd like to see the baby now.
Spoilers. But when Andor's gone, she needs to go back. Yeah. I mean, it's dangerous in Yavin, and they're going to be jumping, and they're going to be doing this. But is it really safe on Minarao? No.
Yeah, that was
now they have a Death Star, and one Death Star, and the Empire's going to get all like stirring up hornets after that. You know, it's not going to get better. Obviously, maybe the Empire has moved on now, but you've got.
And the other thing about it is, at least Vel knew where she was, right? We were left, I don't know, and the whole Bix of it all, I don't know how it ended. Did it help her character? Did it hurt her character? I've seen everyone going back and forth online. Some people saying she should have left absolutely, so that he wouldn't have felt obligated to be with her because she was with child. Then I've seen some other people say this just certifies her as the worst woman in the universe, to leave without ever telling him and giving him the choice to understand that he was a father. And
right.
Was a child
it's complicated.
You know what I mean? It's like two absolute, and you guys are parents. I'm not a parent. You probably feel this even more than I'm able to articulate. Right. But I'm seeing this online, like the two diametrically opposed parts of this. And I'm like putting all that to the side. Vel knew where she was, and she even kind of intimated to Kat, "Don't wait too long. Maybe you want to look her up. Maybe you want to give her. Maybe you want to give her a ring. Use Bail. Bail knows how to get in touch with people, right?" No, I'm kidding.
Skype.
But you know what I mean. So you're left to believe that they knew where she was. Somebody, they're spies. Of course, they're gonna know where she is.
Yeah.
Right? And I think he made a conscious decision not to go there, and maybe we're left to believe that if he didn't experience Project Stardust since I'm the only one who calls it that anymore.
Right.
Firsthand
You're
at the
holding
end of
holding
Rogue
true.
One,
Yeah.
maybe he would have looked her up, right? Maybe he would have felt like, okay, I've done my part now and it's time. But I don't know. Did you guys like the way they ended her character? Did we think that was the best thing to do with her? And I don't think Tony did it exclusively so that they could make a young Andor show in the future, right? To show his son. Do we want to see his son fighting the First Order, for goodness sake? I know I don't.
No,
right. So, I mean,
not.
you know what I mean? It's like, so I don't think that was really the point of it. And reading the interview again, he wanted to leave some hope behind, and he wanted to make it even more heartbreaking in a way, how Cassian went out in Rogue One. And also, I think he secretly hates the fact that people thought he was romantically inclined towards Jyn, because I don't think that was ever his point, and he's said as much in a recent interview. So I do think there was a little bit of that in why Tony made some choices here with Bix. But did you guys like the Bix of it all? Did you think that was a good way to end her character?
I'll let Dan. I think Dan's got
Dan,
more
you
hot
gotta
takes
take
on
it.
this.
I'm
I think
okay.
I'm hitting on the one Dan doesn't like. Right?
Yeah.
I'm hitting. I'm okay with because of baby, because just as a parent, like introduce a child into any situation or the thought of it, and the it just complicates everything to a degree that you cannot, unless you're in that situation, qualify. So I can't. Without that though, I was very upset at the end of the third arc with her taking off. Like most people were like emotional with that speech. I was just annoyed, and that's a hot take because I felt like she delivered it great. It was an emotional scene. Like I get that she's leaving and she's doing what she has to do for Andor, but for me, that wasn't satisfying enough. Like without her saying the rest of it, or him finding out at some point. But then because I didn't know that she had that reasoning when she was doing all that,
Right.
But now that I go back and I'm like, okay, it means more now that she had the reason. I haven't actually rewatched the entire video that she made, knowing that context, so I want to do that, and maybe I'll feel it differently. But but I'm okay with her being on that planet. That makes sense. Again, what happens when she finds out that Andor died? When's she going to find out that Andor died in a couple weeks or whatever at Scarif? What does she do then? Does she get back into it? Is she happy? Is she satisfied sitting there, on Mina Rao with her little baby? So I don't know. And then that's just her. But it was okay. I actually don't mind that was the final scene of the thing either. I was okay with that because it connected you directly to Cassian, and knowing that he's going right then to whatever that planet was to meet the guy that you see at the very beginning of Rogue One. It's like, whoa. So this is like right now, and that baby's like already, 6 months old or maybe like a week old. I don't know. Not very old. 3 months old, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. I see. I both liked it and didn't like it, but I think I like it more for the fact that it did leave us with some hope there, and that it kind of circled back to the name of the show, Andor, and his lineage. It did give us, even watching Rogue One, it was a sad and tragic ending, which Gilroy likes. He definitely liked it. He likes the beautiful tragedy, and he just made it even more so with this, while still giving you hope for that epic character's lineage, and to move on from there. My biggest gripe about it, honestly, was why is she going back to a planet that has an Imperial presence and might have her wanted posters like up everywhere? Like, I don't know. I was more concerned for her safety there. I was like, of all the places she went back to, I was like, maybe you shouldn't go back there. I understood it for the community and for B2 and stuff like that, but she's still in the same problem. I mean, the Empire is still around, and they're still...
Well, she did kill everybody who probably would have remembered her from the first time, so I guess...
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so maybe she was safe. She must have had some other forged documents or something that kept her safe. Bale probably helped her out with that this time, so they didn't have to worry about running or whatever. So, but that was actually my concern. But I didn't mind it. I didn't mind that they left us with some hope there, and I would be okay with seeing Tony write some more with either that character or different characters altogether. But it does give us a little bit more, which we didn't get at the end of Rogue One. And that actually, for me, with Rogue One, was one of the hardest things for me to accept, being a huge Star Wars fan, was the end of Rogue One, nobody making it out alive that we watched the whole entire movie with. That was hard for me to accept because I was excited and I got invested in these characters and I wanted to see more. And then when they all died, I was just like, spoilers for Rogue One. Sorry, everybody. I was like a little taken aback. It took me a while to process it and to accept it in some ways as a Star Wars fan, that it was darker, you know? So I'm glad that even retroactively now he has created a little bit more hope for me in these characters, especially Andor moving forward. So that's why I actually do like that ending there. What about you, fact checker? We didn't touch upon you. Get to the lady's perspective.
Yeah, I didn't mind it. That's why she left. It still is hard, and yeah, KG said in the chat, maybe Cassian knew Bix was pregnant, and that's why he wanted to leave the rebellion so bad. And that makes me torn. I think you posted in the chat, Dan, but that if he knew that, why didn't he go after her?
Right.
Because rebellion or no rebellion, there's nothing more important than family. And so it is a hopeful thing to end on, and maybe gave a little bit of grace to her leaving, but I still was, saddened by it too. So I don't know. Torn is all I can describe it as.
Tony knows how to leave it, questioning things in some ways, and
it's complicated.
It's complicated, but depth. This is definitely a better complicated part, I would say.
Well, and I love that there's so much depth in there that you can kind of create your own headcanon.
Yeah,
true.
He answered a lot of questions, but there's still enough room for us Star Wars fans to create. I think that he knew that she was pregnant, and that's why he did his thing. I can sleep. Or I think that he went to see her one more time before he went to Scarif. There was 5 minutes where he found out, he stopped by, blah, blah, blah. She met K2. They saw Brasso's gravesite. That I can make that up in my head and be happy with that. It doesn't make sense because we saw him in Rogue One and he had no time. But maybe it happened.
Maybe they Skype called,
Maybe on his way to Skiddity Rink, or what was that planet?
Skidamarink.
It was the guy's name. It was like Rinky or something.
Or Rivik or Tivik.
Tivik. Yeah. I knew it had a K in there somewhere, but good old Tivik.
Skidamarink. Tivik.
Yeah. It's like they kept saying his name. We're like, why do they keep saying his name? Your contact Tivik. Remember Tivik? We're like,
the one you're gonna kill before you.
Yeah. And we're like, the guy that he blasts in the first 2 seconds of Rogue One. Oh, that
one
guy.
More casualty.
Yeah, his best friend. They go way back to primary school. Good Lord.
Probably Tim's cousin.
Tim's
cousin. Oh, good grief. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of her, do you think she named, you said it
the
earlier,
baby's name
Matt.
Tim.
You said, did she name the baby Tim?
Oh, I hope not.
No.
I hope not.
No.
You said that. That was so funny. Oh, my goodness. But also, speaking of names and name drops there, I have one question, and maybe, Matt, you can help me out with this. But they mentioned Merrick a few times, and to the point where I was like, why do they keep saying this name Merrick? Is this a character I'm forgetting about? Because the character that comes to mind is Galen Merrick, who is Starkiller, and I don't know. Am I missing?
This is Merrick, the X-Wing pilot, right? Wasn't he at Yavin? He and Dodonna, didn't they hang out? Because I think he was one of the lead. Wasn't he one of the lead X-Wing fighter?
They always mention him with Dodonna, so that would make sense.
That would make more sense. Dang it!
Pretty
my
sure.
Hopes and dreams.
I'm sure he was an X-Wing leader because I think there was either a Lego set or I think they did put out something that was X-Wing. Someone in the chat probably knows, but I think that's why he and Dodonna were out recruiting or doing something. I kind of thought we might see Dodonna. I guess they just didn't want to go there. Although they apparently rebuilt Raddus from the ground up. It wasn't like they had a Raddus laying around from Rogue One. They had to completely recreate that Raddus.
That's crazy.
That was fantastic. I love seeing Raddus again. So cool that they brought him back.
Stephen Stanton did voice him again, which he confirmed. So again, they did some really neat things like that. But yeah, I don't. I think I think, Willman lived. Willman living was not on my bingo card.
Yeah.
Of all the people
Yeah.
of all the people I thought was going to die in the Gorman massacre, Willman
Yeah.
was top of my list.
I love the fact that you had a bingo card.
Not a Santa. Yeah.
He literally had the Santa bingo card.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Santa. Yeah.
KG won. KG did win the tumbler, for goodness sake. She did win.
Good job, KG.
Nice, KG.
Oh man, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
No, but Woman, we thought for sure that's what was crazy about this. We're like, we didn't know who was not going to make it during
Yeah.
the Gorman massacre. We didn't know who was going to make it. And then when, like Nick said, when Cyril was taken out right then, it was like, it made sense when you think about it. But in the moment, we were like,
so
well, what
tough.
just happened? And then even like Luthen, when he did his moment, I was like, oh shoot, he did. Why did he have to? Yeah. And she's going to try to keep him. Oh my goodness. He can't even pass away in peace. Dedra's still trying to salvage his brain and get all the information. I'm like, Dedra, you're a bad person,
Yeah.
And
Well,
then
at that point, even Krennic was so brutal. He's like on the ever increasing ISB death march. He said that to Heard. Heard should have been glad he got killed by K2. I mean, none of those people were going to make it. Krennic was like, y'all. Even he said it to Partagaz. He said, y'all are toast. He's
Yeah.
like, I can't deal with this.
Yep.
I'm out of here.
oh my goodness, I think that's why that episode hit me, because it was him and Lonnie, and then he walks away at the beginning of 10, right? And then he comes back to Lonnie, and Lonnie, they find him just like sitting there. I was like,
The
my
Tuca
goodness.
cat. The Tuca cat finds him. I'm
the
like,
Tuca
what are they
cat.
adding the
Yeah.
Tuca
and
cat
then
into
like
this? Come
literally
on, man.
5 minutes later in the show, Luthen's dead, basically.
Mhm.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Right after that,
Right,
he meets
yeah.
Dedra, and we're like, we can't breathe. Like give us a little more Yavin
yeah.
4 walking around for 5 minutes so I can like breathe.
I need time to process.
After Lonnie and that heavy moment, and then they give you
Yeah.
another heavy
Poor
moment.
Lonnie.
And when Dedra walked in and talked to him in the shop, it was everything coming together, and all the subterfuge, all the underlying,
Yes.
everything they were saying. I was like, she knows, and he knows that she knows,
And
and
maybe
she
it's
knows
just
that he knows.
because I'm phallically challenged, but did you have to pick on his wig of everything else?
I know. Come on.
He's like ragging on his wig of
Right.
all things. I mean, what, the man took some care in that. And she's
Right.
just-
Yeah, it was a good wig.
Brutal.
Mhm.
That
And
was
then-
brutal.
and then
that was
she-
a low blow, even for her. I
As-
do have to say.
That as an actress, she did such a good job of like, do you own all these things? Wow. Like I was
Yeah.
thinking about getting I'm like, she is so twisted.
Being excitedly creepy.
Yeah, I
Oh,
was like, and she's like,
yeah.
I've got one piece I want you to look at. I was like, what is it? What is it? I was like, a bomb. It's a blaster. It's a whatever. And then I was like, and then Luthen turns around. I was like, how's he getting out of this? And even Nick and I were like, I think he's gonna like blow the place, as what I thought. And then it was like silent. And then she's like, what? And then she realizes what he did, and then he had the knife in his hand or whatever, and how fitting that was. And I'm sure there's meaning behind that particular culture and that knife and whatever it means to him, or maybe Clea or whatever. And then the fact that Clea lives on, I guess the only thing I can say about the women is that in war, it always is, and most movie tragedies, or even in life, like the guy ends up going, and then you have like the widow who has to pick up the pieces in war, and the women have to take the mantle and carry
Yeah, that's a fair point.
what it is that the men were fighting for, and that makes it hard. And so I give it a pass for some of like it was, he said, Tony's like, there were like 5 women at the end.
Yeah.
You could say Dedra was Cyril's remaining woman. That was messed up. She didn't end well. Then you have Clea, who was definitely wrecked after Luthen was gone.
Yeah.
And then you have,
Bix.
Bix, who was, I guess, okay, but she's about to be wrecked when she finds out what happened to Cassian.
Right.
And
But
then,
it has more purpose though.
yeah. And then you've got Mon Mothma, who's probably doing what she should have been doing. And Perrin was wrecked.
Yeah. What was? Yeah.
But she wore the pants of the family anyway. He was the
Well-
kid, and I don't know. So you could take it and leave it how that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So the parent of this parent business, this was a very strange thing that they cut out. So apparently there was a whole plot line here where Skulden and Mon Mothma formed sort of a partnership, and Skulden bought the HoloNet news network. And
Oh.
so as a result of this, he kept her broadcast going in a version of the story.
Interesting.
When they interrupted it at the Senate, there was a version of the story where Skulden used his influence to sort of rebel against the Empire and
Wow.
keep that going. So when we saw Perrin and his wife at the end, it was supposedly because both of their spouses rebelled and were sort of shunned, and so they then got together as like the surviving spouses.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense because we were like, why is he with her? And yeah. Okay.
Now we're just sort of left with, I don't know why. I guess they wanted, and there was a version of the story, by the way, also where she, Mon Mothma, spoke to Lita. Was going to speak to Lita before she left, went back to the house, and I don't know why she would have been there, but only Perrin was there. So she never did get to reconnect with Lita, but there was a bit more of a Lita of it all also. But having said all that, I don't know what we're left to think about other than Perrin was just a slime ball the whole time, and somehow he hooked up with the wife of his son.
Right.
Yeah.
That whole thing was so strange.
It was an odd choice. I mean, in some ways, it almost just felt like he was a survivor of that stuff, but also at the same time, he looked messed up because obviously he grabbed for the bottle. So he's like, he's still pretty messed up with the whole situation.
So, I mean,
and it felt like Gilroy was trying to give him a bit of a redemption in this season compared to season 1, which was interesting as well because he had one of the best monologues to me in season 2. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised on that monologue that he gave during the wedding, and even how it felt like he still had feelings for Mon Mothma. And I was even thinking it would be interesting and probably surprise a lot of us if he does end up working with Mon. Although we can't really see that. We couldn't see it, but it would have been an interesting twist. But the way they played it at the end, I was kind of more confused. Now that you've given us that story, it makes a lot more sense. Although the Skolden thing, that's weird that he would choose to rebel in some ways because he seemed very intent to be with the Empire.
That's probably why they cut it. So somehow she convinced him. Somehow she, I think in the version of the story is somehow she confided in him the reason why she really needed the money, right? Because he was the facilitator and all that, and you know, and she told him what they were fighting for, yada yada yada, and somehow he had a little bit of a redemption, or I don't know, right? Maybe, so that's probably why they cut it. But I guess they left the Perrin bit in just to show that he was a survivor and continued on as best he could when she was gone. Because basically she was his meal ticket, right? I think all the wealth was hers. I don't think it was his.
True. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great. And speaking of unanswered arcs, though, there were kind of a few. You mentioned Lita, but then also the sister, which I know I think you brought up to us as well. Why they didn't answer the whole sister arc,
the sister and someone else.
Yeah,
it was the sister and Kino Loy. It was the Kino Loy.
That was the other one I was going to bring up. Yes, thank you. Yeah, Kino Loy.
Sister Kino Loy.
I know you had a take on that, Matt, so I'll let you
explain.
And
I think Gilroy said, I can't remember. I think he said the sister satisfied what he wanted to do there as sort of the catalyst for further radicalizing. For further radicalizing Andor, sort of sending him on a path and through a series of events, right? It's something like that.
Yeah, and how he felt like he always had to rescue people. I think that was part of it, and that caused him to always, because he couldn't rescue his sister, he always had to try and rescue somebody else.
That's it. That's it. And then I think the Kino Loy was, what else could you do, right? He felt like I think he felt like it was so perfect the way Kino's story ended that it didn't feel right to just bring him in some way at the end just because, right? I think Tony was like, listen, I mean, how could you top what happened with him? You know what I mean? From a character perspective, as much as they love Andy Serkis and his performance, it was kind of perfect, right? He enabled everybody else to escape knowing full well he himself could not. So there you go.
Tony,
I guess I would have felt like it was a little diminished if all of a sudden, when the transport landed at Yavin, all of a sudden somehow Kino Loy comes bopping out like, I'm here.
We would have been so happy as a fan, though.
I would have been so.
Right.
I was the one.
It wouldn't have made sense, but it would have made sense.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I was the one that I just wanted to see Kino Loy. Like, almost, the scene in Batman, the last Christian Bale Batman, where he looks over, what's his name? The butler. Alfred looks over and then he sees him and then he just gives the nod. Like, I would have liked Kino to be, I thought his perfect role would have been in charge of logistics for Yavin 4, the base at Yavin 4, or even a different base. And maybe they'll do that, but I understand his reasoning for it actually did make sense. And Star Wars can be negatively affected by trying to put everybody into every story, and it does kind of make the universe feel smaller. And I think he was really just trying to avoid that feeling of, everybody knows everybody. No, it's a big galaxy.
Right.
There's a lot going on in a lot of different places. He
but
didn't make it out. But
did he have to give us super depth with Perrin?
You know
what I'm saying? Like
compared to Kino,
he chose what he wanted to write about. You know, I mean, he could have carried on the depth that he gave us with Kino Loy. Because why do we want Kino? Why do we want to see Kino Loy or know something? Because he gave us incredible arc with him, the best arc of season 1. And then he ended it with "I can't swim."
Right.
But that doesn't mean he didn't make it off. Doesn't mean he didn't go back to prison. He doesn't, we don't see the end. So therefore somehow Kino returns, I mean, it's like.
Then the teases
it's complicated.
Tony himself did wearing the Narkina
and
swim
he wore
team.
the Narkina swim
that's
team.
true.
That was me.
And there was an interview with Kino, and Kino's like, well, I like to think that he made it off. I like to think that he made it. And
well,
somehow,
I mean, every actor likes to think they might come back again. Right?
That's true.
He's not written out forever. And, but that just confirms that he did become Snoke. His hatred, the burn, the fire and the electricity on the thing once the water stopped, it just caught on electricity and he somehow survived, made it on one of those transports. And then, 20 years later, Rian Johnson cast him in.
Somehow, we should try and meet Andy Serkis and ask him I'm sure someone has asked him this before, and I can't imagine how he answered. What I'm trying to say is ask him, what was his favorite Star Wars portrayal? Was it Kino Loy? Or was it Snoke?
Yeah.
And see what he says.
He'll say Gollum.
He'll say Gollum. I think he would say Kino Loy. Maybe he can't contractually say that, but I think honestly though, he gets a better, more satisfying ending, and that's again what makes a lot.
Well, people scream one way out. They don't scream Snoke's in a jar.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point.
That's just it, and that's why we want to keep doing it.
That's
and that's where this connects to. He reminded us of Kino Loy when he showed us the very end with Dedra sitting there. So it's like, it's not my fault. You did it. But at the same time, he didn't need to be there. But Dedra being there forever, is that sad? Does that make you happy? Is that a good way for her to end? Is it Narkina 6?
I think she got what she deserved.
Narkina Chicks.
And Narkina Chicks. Dang it, that was good. Yes, Narkina Chicks. But
even better, if whatever Narkina facility she's in is still manufacturing parts for the Death Star at this moment, and is still fixated on what she was trying to protect this whole time. Even though I still think it would have been better if somehow she ended up on the Death Star.
That's what I thought.
But no, I did not expect. I honestly somehow expected her to salvage. I don't think I really expected her to go down with the proverbial ship. Because remember, even when she was in the jail cell, she was still helping Hirt by talking about the radio and doing all these things. I mean, even when you thought she was at her lowest, she was still trying. And then for her, I guess that's just justice for her to end up in the prison. Whereas, most of the rest of them all ended up dead, except for that Legrat guy, the guy that was like the second in command who went for.
Oh,
he botched it remember he botched it. He couldn't get the Senate feed turned off.
Right.
Somehow
how did he make it?
Right?
Yeah, that didn't make any sense.
Exactly. That's a good point.
Because they sent him to get Pottergrass. I was like, how did he not? He didn't. He was the one who botched the whole. He was just like, well, I guess I'm here. How do I work the system? He didn't somehow he was.
Your chain of command is messed up when you got like Partagaz taking himself out.
Yeah.
Like they didn't lose a war. Like the military isn't done. Yes, he's going to probably get severely demoted or worse. He's going to have to go talk to Vader. maybe that's where he was headed, because we see that in the beginning of episode 4, like what happens when people disagree with Palpatine and they if Vader's there, they get a bad ending.
Yeah.
And then somebody else gets promoted. So maybe that hints at Partagaz,
well, I mean, Partagaz telling Krennic, save it for Palpatine, and then in his spare time listening to Nimic's manifesto.
Yeah.
It probably wasn't.
That's true.
Well for him.
That's true. So what, was he turning at the end? Like he's like, they're right all along. No,
I think he was just like, this is
hopeless.
Exactly. If you think about his first speech, right?
Yeah.
We're here to cut out the disease, right? If you think about where he came from at the very beginning, at the very end, he was like, I have failed at everything I said we were supposed to do so abysmally that this thing is being broadcast around the galaxy now. It's like, what have I done to deserve all of this? And so I think that's why he just decided, forget about this. I'm not going to take a fate worse than death. I'm going to do this here, which again, I wasn't expecting that. When I heard the Nimic's manifesto, I didn't think he was listening to it. I just thought we were being reminded of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Agreed.
That was genius. And it was a nice callback, to his manifesto and how that shaped the rebellion and Andor. And wasn't Andor listening to it at one point or reading it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he was in his parents' ship, right? He lived in his parents' derelict ship for a long time on Ferrix, and that's where he was listening to that manifesto at one point. So obviously he did save it, and he got the word out.